The continent of Africa has seen generations of travelers, slave traders, explorers, missionaries, governors, and scholars of all kinds give out the image of Africa as one of nothing but poverty, barbarism, irresponsibility, and chaos. That is the focus of this expert meeting organized by UNESCO with the assistance from the African Union Commission to discuss on the general history of Africa.
I think that the first generation of African historians dealt with this problem, and the 8th volume of the General History of Africa really contributed to destroy this negative view of the history of Africa. And we now are engaged in a process connected with the African Union and the need to build the African Renaissance. This can be done only by re-evaluating the general history of Africa, to update the writing, and also to take in account what has been happening in the diaspora, especially in Central America, in Brazil, and also in the United States. So we have brought here about 35-40 researchers from Africa and from the diasporas, American and also European. And we have decided first to re-evaluate the general history of Africa. Second, to write a new book on African history, taking in account the present challenges of globalization, the issue as health, environment, and all the trends which represent a threat for the African continent and also for the sovereignty of the African states. And also, we have to take in account not only the American diaspora, which comes from slavery, but also all the diasporas in Africa, in the Indian Ocean, and also in the countries like India, Turkey, etc. Our discussions were very strong, but rich and fruitful. I think that we are in the beginning of a new start, and I'm very confident that we shall do it.
What do you think of how would be the reception of, or what do you expect will be the reception of the general history of Africa by an African diaspora, born American, think like an American, and doesn't know much about the continent?
Well, I think that this diaspora thinks that they are African, but they don't know what is to be African. So we are trying to give them a new view of African history from the most remote times until the present, with an accent, with a focus on the struggles of African peoples to liberate themselves. And Ethiopia is a very good example of this. It is one of the most ancient states in the world. It fought successfully against invasion by Italian with the well-known Battle of Adwa, and also in the 30s and the 40s. And we think that with this new vision of the African diaspora, we shall build a bridge between the emergent countries of Americas, especially Brazil, but also Venezuela, Argentina, Colombia, and the time will come when also the African diaspora in India will help us to build a bridge between Africa and Oriental Asia.
Mais vous savez que nous parlons aujourd'hui beaucoup de panafricanisme, mais c'est une leçon qui nous est venue aux États-Unis. Je vais aussi vous donner un autre exemple qui est récent. Il y a quelques années, vous savez, nous avons tous suivi sur les médias un film qui nous a beaucoup marqué, c'était Roots. C'était un dialogue, c'était un message qui nous venait de nos frères américains. Et puis aujourd'hui, entendre un Américain dire « Je suis un Afro-Américain ». Toute la lutte de ce grand pays est une leçon pour nous. Et tout ce que nous faisons aujourd'hui, nous n'avons pas grand-chose à leur apprendre. Nous leur demandons seulement, nous voulons donner l'écho à leur voix. Donc c'est très facile pour nous. C'est très facile. Et au contraire, tout le débat qu'on fait ici, on voudrait que la question de la diaspora, la question du panafricanisme ne soit plus vécue chez nous comme une espèce de reproche de ceux qui disent « vous nous avez abandonnés ». Non, nous voulons maintenant dire « nous sommes tous ensemble, reconnaissons qui nous sommes, et chacun travaillons pour que nous occupions une place meilleure dans le monde d'aujourd'hui. »
Dans cette initiative,
d'apprendre par exemple que le 9e volume a été totalement financé par le gouvernement du Brésil. Et le gouvernement du Brésil a même pris de l'avance sur les pays africains. Il y a 10 ans, le gouvernement brésilien a pris une loi dans laquelle il dit il faut enseigner l'histoire de l'Afrique. Il faut que chaque Brésilien apprenne l'histoire de l'Afrique. Mais nous, quand on était peut-être plus jeunes ou bien nos aînés à nous apprenaient que nos ancêtres étaient les Gaulois. Mais les Américains, comme d'autres diasporas, n'ont pas oublié, eux, que leurs ancêtres étaient des Africains. Donc le lien pour nous est très facile.
merci beaucoup, Son Excellence.
C'est moi qui vous remercie.
Relevant to the new Africa.
You know, the General History of Africa was launched in the 60s, the project. It was exactly to respond to the racial prejudices, to the negative images still going and that occur on the Africans and African history. You know, as you remember, as Africa was supposed to be a continent without history, without main important culture and civilization, and that it was always a continent that received people, invaders from abroad, and that African population, African peoples did not contribute a great deal to the progress of humanity. And exactly the General History of Africa was to respond to that prejudices in a scientific and methodological way, not only politically but scientifically. And that is why the newly independent African states ask the assistance of UNESCO to rewrite their history and to get the ownership of the discourses on their histories and culture. So that is really the principle and the main objectives behind the General History of Africa. And African scholars and historians really took that very seriously. They mobilize themselves, they create institutions, they make the necessary research. 350 of them contribute to this monumental achievement, monumental collection of 8 volumes, each of volume around 1,000 pages, which cover the history of Africa from 3 million years ago up to the 60s, 70s. So that was the achievement of the General History of Africa. And from the beginning, it was clear for the initiators of this project to translate this knowledge into textbook, into curricula. And that, unfortunately, was not done sufficiently. 10 years after the completion of the General History of Africa, very few African countries have integrated this knowledge into their curricula. And till now, today, we have a lot of countries who teach a history of Africa which still have a certain Eurocentrism in it. So that's why UNESCO have launched the second phase of the General History of Africa in 2009, which is the pedagogical use of of this collection.
Is the objective, though, by UNESCO to penetrate this into schools so that young, growing African children in primary school, for example, could understand their history better?
Yes, of course. As you know, UNESCO is in charge of education and culture, and this project is in linking the culture to education. So the objective of this second phase is to produce textbooks, to produce what we call pedagogical material, comprising curricular outline, teacher guides, textbooks, historical atlas, a glossary of new decolonized terminology, paradigm, and concept, to be integrated in the different level of the education. The primary level, we have designated 3 age groups: 10 to 12, 13 to 16-year-old, and then 17 to 19 years old. So for each of these different age group, we will develop that material to be taught and to be integrated in the curricula of African countries. So the challenge is that we wish to develop a common content that should be integrated in all African countries which have different education system. If we achieve to do that with the help of the African Union and the African government, of course, Africa will be the only continent to have a common content in history to be taught across Africa. That will be an achievement, and we are working on that direction.
In the context of the African Golden Jubilee, we talked about Pan-Africanism, and I talked about the Pan-Africanism from the perspective of Brazil. And one of the points is exactly that. In the process, first of all, our decolonization, independence occurred in a much earlier period of time. It was in 1822, much time before that the notions of Pan-Africanism emerged. Those notions emerged in the 1900s. So we are, let's say, ahead in this process of independence. Secondly, we have the question of language. The production of knowledge in Pan-Africanism are mainly in English and in French. And so Brazil is a Lusophone country. It's natural that in that time also the number of literate people were very low. All these things made with that, let's say, history, the culture of Africa didn't has been implemented in the school. Another thing it was, and I think that this point is very, very important, is the question of the process of building up the national identity. This process of construction of the national identity that started in immediately after the end of slavery in Brazil, 1888, and the advent of the Republic, 1889, it didn't take into consideration the different points of deport of the different peoples that now from Brazil. And in this sense, and I think that you have been very successful in this model of create a national identity. One Brazilian is one Brazilian, and that's it. Despite the fact that he's white, Afro-descendant, Asian descendant, or so forth. But the fact is that now I think that this model has accomplished his role. It's time that you give new elements. And in this sense, it comes the question of the teaching of the African history and culture in Brazil. And I really hope that in the next generation, you are already working on that. Youth, much beyond football players and carnival.
Yeah, you see, there is lots of commonalities between Ethiopia and Brazil. the attitude, the mindset, the approach, and the hospitality between Ethiopia, within Ethiopian people, you can find in Brazil also. So there is a lot to be shared, and the football, the samba dance, and the agricultural policy, and the pro-poor policy of Brazil, and the pro-poor policy of Ethiopia. There is lots of commonalities between the two countries.
What would be a wish for Africa in the next 50 years?
Oh, the development, peace, stability, competitiveness with the rest of the world. You see, with other continents. Yeah.
Thank you very much, His Excellency.
Thank you.
So let's just get you. It's Africa Day. Let's just celebrate by asking you, what would be a wish for Africa in the next 50 years?
Prosperity, prosperity, and unity.
Is a continent that has a very bad press. When you speak of Africa, in many places they think misery, they think civil wars, but when I come to Africa, I see a lot of hope. What Africa wants as a dream? Africa wants to go back to a position within this little blue planet of ours, of being a place of pride, a place where everybody will come here to learn, to visit, and to feel good. That is, I think, the dream and the future of Africa.
Today is Africa Day, and are you going to party with all the Africans compatriots that you've been meeting so far?
Our president is here.
Okay.
She's going to speak at Millennium Hall. Our sister, the ambassador of Brazil in Addis Ababa, is gathering all of us here to celebrate. We celebrate the Day of Africa. That is also, we are not far from Lucy, the birth of mankind. So the other continents are coming back home.
We are here at the Ethiopian National Stadium, where the football game between Ethiopia and Sudan is going to take place in a moment. This is part of the celebration of the 50th anniversary of the Organization of African Unity, now the African Union. This is all part of the Golden Jubilee of Africa.